We're all familiar with that feeling, right? That kind of knot in your stomach when you've got deadlines breathing down your neck. Yeah. Or that feeling of complete overwhelm when your inbox is just exploding.
Yeah, it's definitely something I think most of us have experienced at some point in our working lives.
Exactly. And that's actually what we're diving into today. Work stress.
It can be a real beast.
It can. And to help us unpack this, we're going to be looking at a blog post today that explores what workplace stress really is, how to recognize if you're dealing with it, and most importantly, what you can do about it.
The goal is to give you guys listening some practical strategies and some resources that you can use so you can feel more in control.
Yeah, because who doesn't want to feel more in control of their work life?
Right.
So before we get into the nitty-gritty of dealing with it, I think it's helpful to actually define what we mean by workplace stress, because it's more than just, having a busy day.
Right. It's not just having a lot on your plate. It's more specific than that. According to this blog, it's a type of stress that comes up when there's this mismatch between what your job demands of you and the skills and resources you have or the needs you have.
It's like being asked to bake a cake and only being given flour and water. Like, you might be able to make something.
But exactly, It's not going to be what they were hoping for.
Right. And it's going to be really frustrating.
And the thing is, the impact of this kind of stress goes way beyond just you being frustrated as an individual. This blog highlights that something like 74% of people in the U.S. say they feel stressed when they're overwhelmed at work.
Wow. That's a lot of people.
It is. It's a huge number. And while the blog focuses on data from the U.S., it's safe to assume that workplace stress is a pretty global phenomenon.
For sure. All right. So let's say you're listening and thinking, okay, maybe I am feeling a bit stressed. How do you actually know? What are the signs?
So the blog has this really helpful checklist of symptoms. Some are pretty obvious, like constantly feeling overwhelmed, or you're finding it hard to concentrate, or maybe your sleep patterns or your appetite have changed.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, right?
Yeah.
The late nights at the office fueled by coffee.
Exactly. But then there are these physical symptoms that people might not connect to stress right away. Things like headaches, digestive issues, or even like a racing heart.
It's like our body is trying to send us a signal that something's not right.
Yeah, it's like a warning light. And it's super important to pay attention to these signs, because if you just ignore it, stress can snowball into much bigger problems like anxiety, depression, or even burnout. And that can impact your whole life, not just work.
Okay, so we're getting a sense of how serious this can actually be. So before we move on to what we can do about it, I'm curious about what causes workplace stress in the first place. Because I think sometimes we just assume it's just part of the job.
Right. We just think it's the nature of work. But some of the causes are pretty clear. Like, obviously, heavy workloads and tight deadlines, those are going to contribute.
Those are the big ones.
But this blog goes a bit deeper and looks at some of the less obvious causes as well.
Okay, so what are some of those less obvious things that can be stressing us out at work?
Well, things like feeling like you don't have any control over your work. That can be a big one. Or having unclear expectations from your manager. Or maybe you're struggling with work-life balance. Or even, working in a toxic environment. All of these things can really add to your stress levels.
It's interesting you mentioned that lack of control, because I think a lot of people feel that way at work. Like things are just happening to them.
It's like you're trying to navigate through a maze, but you don't have a map. It's just disorienting and makes you anxious.
Totally. So it sounds like understanding these different causes is a crucial first step before we can even start thinking about managing stress effectively.
For sure. Because once you can pinpoint what's actually causing the stress, then you can start to come up with specific strategies to address it.
Okay, so let's get to the good stuff. How do we actually tackle this stress monster? What are some of the things that people can actually do to manage their stress levels?
Well, this blog makes a really important point that managing stress is a two-way street. Both employees and employers have a part to play in making work a healthier place to be.
So it's not just about, individual coping mechanisms. It's about the system as a whole.
Exactly. But let's start with what individuals can do. The blog suggests things like setting boundaries, learning to say no, prioritizing tasks, taking breaks, and exploring mindfulness techniques. And it also highlights how important it is to seek support when you need it.
Those are all really great points, but I think for a lot of people, they might sound a bit abstract. Like, how do you actually put those tips into practice when you're in the middle of a crazy busy day?
I agree. It's all about finding what works for you, right? And building up this toolkit of strategies that you can turn to when things start to feel overwhelming. And this blog actually had some pretty cool suggestions for tangible steps you can take.
Okay, lay it on me.
One that really stood out was this idea of focusing on what you can control.
That's interesting, because often it feels like work stress is just completely out of our hands.
Right. But the thing is, even in those really tough situations, there are always things you can control. Even if it's just small things, like how you respond to a stressful email, or how you choose to prioritize your tasks. You have control over how you communicate your needs to your boss. And taking ownership of those things, even the small things, it can make a world of difference.
So instead of getting totally bogged down by this massive to-do list, maybe a good place to start is just picking a couple things you can realistically achieve today.
Absolutely. Breaking down those big projects into smaller, more manageable steps can really help you feel like you're back in the driver's seat. The blog actually mentioned the Pomodoro technique as a helpful tool for this.
Okay, I've heard of that,
Yeah.
but I'm not entirely sure how it works.
Yeah, so it's basically a time management method where you work in focused bursts. So you set a timer for 25 minutes and you work on just one task without any distractions. Then once that timer goes off, you take a 5-minute break. And you do this 4 times, and then you take a longer break, like 20 or 30 minutes.
So you're kind of building those breaks into your day.
Exactly. So you're not pushing yourself to the point of burnout. And those short breaks can really help you clear your head and come back to your work feeling refreshed.
I like that. So we've got breaking down tasks into smaller chunks and using the Pomodoro technique. Any other tools we can add to our arsenal?
Well, the blog also talked about mindfulness, which can be super helpful even if you only have a few minutes.
Yeah, mindfulness is everywhere these days. But I'll admit, I'm still not 100% sure what it actually means. Like, practically speaking, what does it look like to practice mindfulness at work?
Mindfulness is basically about being present in the moment without judgment. So you're just noticing your thoughts and feelings without letting them carry you away. So there are tons of different techniques, but one simple exercise is focusing on your breath. Just pay attention to how it feels as you breathe in and out.
So it's kind of like a mini meditation at your desk.
Yeah, pretty much. And you don't need anything special. You can do it anywhere, even for just a minute or two. There are also some great apps out there like Headspace or Calm that have guided meditations specifically for stress.
Yeah, those can be really good for people who are just starting out. Okay, so we've got controlling what we can pull, mindfulness exercises, and the Pomodoro technique. The blog also mentioned setting boundaries, which I think can be a really tricky one, especially in a work culture that's all about hustle and being always on. How do you set those boundaries without feeling like you're letting your team down?
It's a really good point. It can be tough, especially when there's this expectation that you're always available. But setting boundaries is so important for protecting your well-being. And it's not selfish. It's actually essential if you want to avoid burnout.
So where do you even begin with that?
Well, it starts with getting clear on your own priorities and limits. Like, what are the things you're willing to say yes to, and what are the things you need to say no to?
It's about making conscious choices.
Exactly. It's about how you want to spend your time and energy. And then it's about communicating those boundaries clearly and respectfully to the people you work with.
That can be a really uncomfortable conversation to have, though, right?
Yeah.
Especially if you're worried about seeming like you're not a team player.
It can be. It definitely takes practice. But one approach is to try framing it in a more positive way. So instead of saying, I can't do that, you could say something like, hey, I'm really committed to doing good work, and with everything I have going on right now, I don't think I could give this the attention it deserves. Maybe we could chat about it once Project X is finished.
Yeah. So you're not saying no. You're just saying not right now.
Exactly. And sometimes setting boundaries also means just disconnecting from work completely when you're not at work. So like resisting that urge to check your email after hours or on the weekends.
Easier said than done, right?
So true. But it's super important for work-life balance. You can't be on all the time. And this is also where employers can step up and create a culture that respects boundaries and encourages people to switch off after work.
It's about making work sustainable so people can actually thrive, not just survive.
Exactly. And that's not just better for the employees, it's better for the company too.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of things that individuals can do to deal with stress. But like you said before, employers have a role to play here too. So what are some concrete things companies can do to create a more supportive, less stressful work environment?
That's a great question. And it's something we'll definitely be getting into more as we continue this conversation. It's a really important part of the puzzle.
Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about what we as individuals can do to manage that stress. But like we said, this isn't just a one-sided thing. Employers also have a responsibility to create a work environment that actually supports people's well-being.
100%. It's like if you're building a house, you can have the best workers, the best materials, but if the foundation is shaky, the whole thing's going to fall apart.
I like that analogy. So how can employers build that strong foundation for a less stressful workplace? What can they actually do?
Well, this blog highlights a bunch of different initiatives, but one that really resonated with me was the idea of an open door policy.
Okay, I've heard that term a lot, but what does it actually look like in practice? Like, how do you actually make an open door policy work?
It's about creating a culture where people feel comfortable going to their manager with questions or concerns without feeling like they're going to get in trouble.
So it's not just about having a door that's literally open.
Yeah.
It's about building trust.
Yeah, exactly. It's about making sure people feel safe speaking up. Because when employees feel like they're being heard, they're less likely to bottle things up. And that can prevent small issues from turning into big problems.
Right. It's like if you can't talk about what's bothering you, it just kind of festers and creates more anxiety.
Exactly. And all that unspoken anxiety, it just creates a more stressful environment for everyone. Another thing the blog talked about was flexibility, especially when it comes to work arrangements.
Yeah, flexible schedules are huge these days.
Right. It could be working from home a couple days a week, or having flexible start and end times, or even just having the freedom to structure your day in a way that works for you. All of that can make a big difference in terms of stress levels.
It's about recognizing that people have lives outside of work, and sometimes life throws you curveballs.
And when employees feel like their company gets that and respects that, it builds loyalty and commitment.
So it's a win-win. Were there any other initiatives from the blog that jumped out at you?
One that kind of surprised me was the idea of providing healthy snacks at the office.
Wait, really? Snacks can actually help with stress.
I know it sounds kind of small, but think about it. When you're stressed and overworked, you're way more likely to reach for those sugary snacks for a quick energy boost.
Oh, totally. Guilty as charged.
We've all been there. But those sugary snacks, they just lead to energy crashes later on, which actually makes the stress worse in the long run. Having healthy snacks available can help people make better choices and keep their energy levels more stable throughout the day.
It's like a nudge in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. The blog also emphasized the importance of clear expectations and communication. So making sure everyone knows what's expected of them right from the start.
It's true. When you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing, that creates so much unnecessary stress.
Totally. When roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, it helps everyone feel more confident and focused. And on that note, the blog had some strong words about micromanaging.
Oh yeah, micromanaging. Talk about a stress inducer.
It's the worst. It's like having someone constantly looking over your shoulder, second-guessing everything you do. Not exactly a recipe for a calm and productive work environment.
So it's about trusting your employees to do their jobs and giving them the space to actually do them.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing their contributions, celebrating their successes. It all contributes to a more positive and supportive workplace.
Totally. A little appreciation goes a long way, but it's important to remember that this blog is just a starting point.
There's so much more that companies can do, from offering mental health resources and stress management workshops to just encouraging people to take breaks and get moving during the day.
It's about creating a culture that prioritizes well-being and recognizing that employees are people, not robots.
Right. And when employers actually invest in their employees' well-being, it benefits everyone. You see higher productivity, better morale, lower turnover rates. It's a win-win all around.
This has been such a great deep dive. We've explored what workplace stress really is, how to recognize the signs, and most importantly, what we can all do to manage it better, both as individuals and as organizations.
What I find really interesting is how this blog shows the connection between individual well-being and the overall health of a company. It's a good reminder that creating a healthy work environment is everyone's responsibility.
That's such a powerful takeaway. It makes me wonder about the bigger picture. Like, what if instead of just trying to manage stress, we actually try to prevent it in the first place? What if companies design their workplaces with well-being at the forefront?
That's a big challenge, but it's also a huge opportunity to create workplaces where people can actually thrive.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into taming the workplace stress monster. We hope you learned something new and that you feel empowered to take control of your own well-being at work.
And remember, you deserve to thrive, not just survive.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and take care.